but we will get started now. So hello, everybody, and welcome to our first ever Wisconsin Saltwise Wednesday webinar. My name is Madison with Wisconsin Saltwise, and I'm just really thrilled that you're all joining us today. We have 3 different private contractors from the Madison area who've taken the Saltwise Smart Salting class and have begun to change their practices in winter maintenance and salt use, and have some great stories to share. So we're going to hear a little bit about the practices that they've adopted, and then we will have some time for Q&A. So at any time you can put any questions that you have into the chat, and probably about like 20-25 minutes in, we hope to switch over to that Q&A. So again, this is just a place, these webinars, hopefully a place for us to talk and share about salt reduction, what's happening, what are some opportunities, and sharing these best practices so that we can really protect our freshwater. So without further ado here, I will let my presenters, our co-presenters here, introduce themselves. Gentlemen, so if you want to, anybody can start.
Yeah, so I'm Jeremy Johnson. I'm with the Bruce Company. We're one of the largest landscape contractors and snow contractors in the Dane County area. I started with the Bruce Company as a snow shoveler in the winter of 2009. So this will be my 12th winter with the Bruce Company. I'm now the snow operations manager in charge of logistics and salt reduction. So that's sort of my role.
Dan Dean. I own Mad Plowing and Mowing. I'm a small business, a small contractor that does snow removal and landscaping in the Madison area, and I've done that for about 20 years now.
My name is Matt Meyer with Enviro Sealers. We are an asphalt maintenance company. And we also offer the snow removal services. Company started in 2015. I started doing snow removal for another contractor 3 years ago. And then last year was our first year doing it on our own. So I'm definitely the greenhorn in the bunch, but happy to be here.
Thank you. And it looks like Adam has said hello in the chat to everybody. Adam is another contractor in the area. So we will get started here. I'm going to ask each of you to share a little bit about when you took the class. I guess Matt did that already. And then kind of what were the big takeaways that really motivated you to get started with salt reduction?
Yeah, so I can go ahead and start here. I guess I was sent to the class by my company in 2017 to just kind of look into it, see what it was. We try to stay on the kind of leading edge of things, and salt pollution wasn't something that I or we had really kind of thought that much about before that. So I took the class in 2017 and kind of have slowly implemented from that point on. Took away just a lot of information. I guess as you're putting salt down, or before that point, never really thought about the actual end results that were happening from that salt use. So it was definitely a major eye opener, and definitely began a change in the way that we do things here.
And I took the class, I believe the same year, the first year that we had it, maybe it was 2016 or 2017. Honestly, I apologize, I don't remember. And my main thing is, one, I was looking to reduce the amount of salt that we put down. It was in conjunction with the Madison Metropolitan Sewer and Water District, looking for some issues. They had some issues with some wells in the area where we do some commercial properties, and they were looking for people to see if they could reduce the amount of salt that washed out into the sewer system and it leached into the soil because they're worried about having to put reverse osmosis systems on the wells in the area. And and frankly, I care about the environment. I drink the water in the area, so it sounded like a good idea to me. So.
I took the class in October of 2020, so just last year. And to be honest, I was just taking the class to try and get my hands on any information to try and help us really kind of have a successful first year at the helm of winter maintenance. And I really didn't understand the magnitude of the problem. And much like Dan, I care about the environment. It just makes sense to have clean water. So any practices that we can help move along and help anybody else, gain an awareness of what's happening, we're all for that.
All right, thank you all. My next question is really kind of diving in here. If you can describe your practices before and after the class. So what were changes, if you made any changes to application methods or application rates, maybe materials that you were using? Did you change contracts with your clients? So we can better understand how you have implemented salt reduction practices.
If you're all right, I'd go first with this one, if you don't mind. It was a slow start to it because the first year using salt brine, I was kind of unsure of things, and a lot of it was to collect data for the Friends of Lake Wingra and the Madison Metropolitan Water and Sewer District. And so I didn't charge anybody anything. My practices before where you just hammered down as much salt as it took to melt the ice off of the parking lot. So, if you had to put 2 tons of salt in a parking lot, you put 2 tons of salt in a parking lot. But starting with the brine, and again, we had to figure out, parking lot condition is what I found is a huge factor. If you have an old, crappy parking lot, you're not going to have any success using brine, essentially. Because we started out with 6 commercial lots, and we had 2 that were brand new. They'd just been resurfaced. We had 2 that were probably 10 years old, and we had 2 that were 20 plus years old that were in poor repair. And the 2 that were in poor repair, we had to use the same amount of salt, even in conjunction with using the brine, to melt off the parking lots. The other lots, you could see a little bit of a difference, but by using the pre-application, for the brine, and then using pre-wetters on the salters, we saw anywhere from 50 to 60% reduction in the amount of salt that we had to use in these particular parking lots. I know on a typical snowfall, as an example, we would use close to 1 ton of salt in the parking lots. And tracking this through the course of the winter, ended up using approximately, 0.45 tons, or just under 1,000 pounds of salt per average application. And I went back and compared the records over the past 3 or 4 years on that particular property, and you could see that the amount that we use on a typical snowfall was consistently at around 1 ton. We changed our practices in terms of billing the customer. After the first year, we implemented a charge to brine the parking lots, beforehand, because honestly, it's a tough sell for people. Some of you guys are probably thinking, well, why would I want to use less salt? That means I make less money. And again, like I said, it doesn't have to be that way. You can use the application of the brine as a charge to the customer to supplement the difference that you're not making in the amount of salt that you're putting down. Plus, you're not obviously wasting that product by throwing it out there, and it's better for the water and everyone else. But again, like I said, calibrating your brine unit, for the amount of brine that you put down is, I mean, there is a learning curve to that. And then also temperature wise, when you apply the brine, we used a mixture, a glycol mixture for colder temperatures. So we were able to apply the brine year round, even on some of the colder days where the pavement temperature dropped below 15 to 16 degrees. But again, like I said, that's something internally that you guys have to kind of gauge. I have some lots that we don't apply the brine, on those colder temperatures, just because we're the additional cost. They don't want to, have the glycol and stuff like that mixed in with it. So sorry for rambling on all that time. I'll let somebody else talk now.
Yeah, so from our end, very similar experience. It was kind of a slow start. What we really needed was a customer, and we had a really great large customer kind of come on in the, I think it's 2018, 2019 season, who wanted to really begin salt reduction for similar reasons that that's affected in Madison, right in the kind of University Ave corridor. This property owner was kind of near there, and so they wanted to begin that practice. So at that particular site, over the years, we've continuously reduced salt use. We're down 75% on roads from where we were 4 years ago. We're down 50% on sidewalks at that site. So it really so what changed ultimately was having a customer who really had bought in, communicated well, knew what we were doing, and allowed us to, sort of work things out there. It also helped that the year previous we had started to work things out on our own facilities, on our own sites, where we could do some testing. So we had some comfort level before we went to our customers with it. But at that particular site, we've changed just about everything that we do. We've upgraded equipment. We've upgraded, cutting edges on our loaders, on our skid steers. We've gone to a lot more brewing instead of just physical or mechanical clearing with shovels and stuff. We've gone to not only pre-wetting our post-application, but then doing brine, and then of course doing an additive to that brine so that we're able to do that in all conditions. So yeah, and the added bonus to that is we do now have a tool in our toolbox with those liquids to do some de-icing when temperatures do get to the point where a rock salt isn't able to work. So that's been an added benefit.
For us, it was our first year out. So prior to that, I had done kind of like what Dan was saying when I worked with another guy. You plow it and then you just hammer it with salt and, hope that it stays clear. Well, then getting the education, we decided to go into the, pre-treating the parking lots with the brine. And I would really stress kind of what these guys had said is really having that open line of communication with your customers. We charged right away the first year, but we always kept it really clear with our customers. This is what we're trying to do. We got buy-in from them right away. I don't have a whole lot of accounts, so it was maybe easier for me to do that way. And the comfort level I tried to assure them was, look, if I need to come back, I'll just come back and salt, but this is what we're going to try, and we're going to try and go light. And I'll tell you that, honestly, I think the brine works great. And I also think that just having the knowledge that you can use less salt really makes a reduction as well. And, until you kind of start playing around with that, You don't have to just hammer it on, and you can still make money by, doing this in a more environmentally friendly way.
All right, thank you all. So it sounds like sorry, yes,
Allison,
Dan?
can I add one more thing to that also? And this is just from my own personal experience over the last, 6 years or 5 years of using the brine. I found that that when you're using the brine product, your parking lots typically end up clearer in the end. For the end product, I could tell a difference in the parking lots that we brine beforehand, especially ones that have heavier traffic. They scrape better, they clear better, and just overall you end up with a better product in the end for the customers. So
No, thanks, Dan. That's great. And as you were saying that, it looked like Jeremy and Matt were nodding in agreement as well. So definitely important point that pre-treatment, which it sounds like you're all doing, treating with liquid salt, right? Sodium chloride mixed with water. Sometimes it sounds like some additives in there, especially Dan had mentioned that. Well, Dan and Jeremy both. But that by doing that pre-treatment before the storm, you come in, you plow, and you can use much less salt in the end. It sounds like maybe roughly 50% less. I know Dan had put in there that caveat, depending on the quality of the parking lot or the pavement. So Dan, you also brought up the importance of, well, you all did, communicating with your customers and how to charge then for that pre-treatment. So it sounds like possibly you're doing that as like a flat rate to pre-treat for brine and still charging kind of per amount of rock salt that you put down. Are those kind of the way you're running contracts? Has anybody shifted to move away from charging per amount of salt you're putting down?
I'll say this, that I have in a couple instances, gone to just flat rates.
Kind of per event then?
Per event, which, just includes everything, all told together. And so that really encourages you to try not to have to use as much salt on the parking lots and stuff. And I mean, if you're in that situation, that can be kind of tricky because, not every customer is going to want a flat monthly charge and what have you. And obviously it can be, sometimes obviously that can be detrimental to you based on if we get, a lot of snow. We haven't had some really heavy winters in the last year, but I mean, if you remember the winter of 2007, 2008, if you had flat rate accounts, it was rough for you. So.
Yeah, on that note, I would agree with that. At the Bruce Company, we've always operated with a per event salt rate. We don't charge salt by the pound. I would recommend, just based on kind of where the industry is going, if you can get away from that charging by the pound and do a more of a per application on the brine and a per application on the salt as well. It's easier to bill. It's a lot less tracking, a lot less that you have to kind of rely on your operators to. And so for a larger company, it's especially important because we got so many different hands kind of on the material that per event situation is better. But then, yeah, trying to protect yourself with an overage rate if you are on a flat monthly. If you get, if we get over 50, 60 inches and start charging again.
Matt, did you want to jump in there? You're good? Okay, great. Jeremy, before we move on, we did have one question come in here that you mentioned an additive, and people were curious what the additive is that you're using, or maybe multiple.
So we use an additive called AMP from Envirotech. That's the one that we've landed on. We've had really good results with. Typically, I always use at least 5%. You can go up as much as 10-20% if you start getting some really cold temperatures. It's not the cheapest product, but it's a good additive. We've had really good results. We don't know exactly what's in it. I would assume that there's so yeah, I'd assume that there's calcium and magnesium, but there's also a tackifier, something that just kind of keeps that product in place so we have good long-term results. It doesn't get tracked away really easily. Envirotech makes a product called AMP, and that's what we use, but there's tons of stuff on the market. Do your own testing and find what works best for you, but that's where we've landed.
Right. Thanks.
And I've used the magnesium chloride before as an additive in there. I will say this, that it is, you want to be careful. It's when it's way more corrosive than just using the salt brine. I've switched over to a glycol, but that's mostly because of a relationship with some of the airports and airlines in the area, and I've used their glycol that they use to spray planes to mix in. It's not as corrosive. It lowers the temperature to be used. I mean, in a lot of cases, we'll use it all the way down to the pavement temperature being at 5 degrees. We'll mix in 20% of the glycol, but that's honestly, I'm pretty fortunate in that aspect, just because I have that ability to take the product that they weren't going to use anyways, they were going to dispose of, which allows me to kind of recycle that particular product. But I will say this: there's a lot of options out there, but just I would do a lot of research before you make a decision on using those products. And it is important because it is below 15 degrees. If you're not using an additive, you can cause more problems for yourself by putting that brine down. So that's an important thing to remember also.
Thanks, Dan. And I think Dan,
I just jump back in quick on that. I didn't mention that AMP by Envirotech does have, they say, a corrosive inhibitor in it as well. So there is so yeah, a straight magnesium, I would agree, has those extra corrosive properties, but according to our manufacturer, there is a corrosive inhibitor, but again, that's we don't know exactly what's in there because it's proprietary.
Proprietary, yeah. And so I think, Dan, you kind of answered another question came up about the purpose of those additives. Yes, is generally primarily to lower the effectiveness or the temperature at which salt is effective. So salt brine, when you're adding water, you want to make sure it's not going to refreeze. And as the temperature gets lower, we know salt becomes less effective. So adding some additives, whether it's organics or the magnesium calcium chlorides, can all work to reduce the temperature at which that brine is effective. I'm actually just right now jumping out of a 2-day symposium on salt, and one of the researchers out of Washington State University is talking about different beet materials that are used as additives. So I think people have heard about maybe beet heat or beet juice. There are areas of Wisconsin where people are using brines from, like pickling, cheese brines, but the sugars in the beet juices can also lower the melting temperature, but they can also cause issues, right? Where if we have this organic matter coming into the streams, the microbes, when they eat that up, are going to also pull oxygen out of the water. And so this scientist is looking into taking the greens off the beets. So it's a lower sugar content, and so potentially would have less of an impact on the organisms in terms of reducing that biological oxygen demand. So there's a lot of research ongoing into what are the best additives to put in to melt get rid of that snow, and also do as little damage as possible. So
if I could just jump back in quick, because I thought of this, one of the really important things from a production standpoint, or from like an actual ability to apply your material about those additives, is if you're storing your equipment and you don't have inside storage, if the temperatures, if the temperatures fall and those in your nozzles, your pumps, anything, your lines freeze up, they can be very difficult to unfreeze. And so a lot of times if we're doing a longer term storage, we'll just make sure that there's at least a little bit of that additive in there too, because that's worst case scenario is if you go out trying to spray and all of your equipment's froze up, it becomes difficult to deal with.
Thanks, Jeremy. Now that's a great transition right into different barriers you've overcome and how you've done that. So potentially a barrier of that brine kind of freezing in nozzles and pipes if we aren't making sure that you've got enough of additive to depress the freezing temperature. Are there other barriers that you've overcome? Anyone can jump in.
For me, I guess one of the biggest things in our company is scaling up. We have a lot of accounts. We do almost 200 sites on any given event, and we're not brining at all of those sites, obviously, right now as we kind of introduce our customers to it. So having different expectations or different protocols at different sites can be difficult in a larger organization. So just making sure that your people are well trained, they know what you're doing, they know why you're doing it. It doesn't do us a bit of good if we have brine trucks out spreading brine at sites, and then a crew goes there during the event, doesn't know the brine was put down, and doesn't change their practices on the back end. So that's been the biggest thing. You know, a lot of times we have quite a bit of turnover, especially in sidewalk salt applications. So training is probably one of the biggest barriers that we have. And then from the sales side, getting buy-in that reduced salt doesn't necessarily mean a reduced outcome or a change of service level. It can actually increase that service level. That's an interesting barrier that a lot of customers can't quite get to yet. So those are my main two.
I with being a smaller organization, our biggest barrier was really a logistical one, and that was we didn't have a truck set up to be dedicated as just like the brine application. So it would be having a tote, putting brine in, going and applying it, coming back, emptying the tote, taking that off the truck so you could go plow with it without, banging this, brine around on the back of your vehicle. In what's already kind of a chaotic time before an event, just added an extra step. So, that's something that, just because, I don't know who's in the audience right now, but some of you might be just one or two trucks, and that be something that you have to consider with, when do you want to apply? Do you have enough time to go and apply everything and come back and recover from that? So it's really just a matter of it. When it's a single event, not bad, but when you get hammered back to back, right, then it's kind of like, oh, and at some point I have to sleep, right? So having a vehicle set up just to be your brine applicator, I think would be beneficial. Or there's nothing to say that you can't just subcontract this work to maybe an outfit that's well equipped to put down brine, and that way kind of everybody's winning.
I would agree with both of their assessments on that. And again, like I said, I'm a smaller, we're a smaller operation, and I would agree that one of the toughest things is when you have back-to-back snow events, to try and find the time in there to go and do an application sometimes can be daunting. And he is right. We dedicated it just one truck to leave the brine unit in, which was the only real feasible way to have any any sense of being able to try and get out there in between when you have back-to-back snow events. But also too, Jeremy's right. It's surprisingly, it's sometimes for people it's a tough buy-in to say, hey, we're going to end up using less salt, because people are worried about getting sued. They're worried about slips and falls and this and that. And to try and sell them on that sometimes can be probably the most difficult part of it.
If I can piggyback on what Dan just said, so I consulted a lawyer prior to getting involved with brining, and his advice really was, look, if you're keeping good records, you have a SOP in place, and if you're in accordance with what the application rates are with whether it be Dane County or Madison, then you and your property owner are going to be pretty well protected. Like there's but you have to be able to say, yes, we put something down. You can't just say, yeah, we did it. I mean, you have to be able to kind of stand on that. But he's right. I mean, that is an apprehension of customers and for you as contractors. But the advice I got, I think, was pretty sound. And as long as you're staying, and can prove that you're doing it with the specs that are laid out, you should be covered.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. The liability piece is one that is very real. And unfortunately, because of the litigious society that we live in, there is that fear. And actually, another presenter in the SALT Symposium today from Canada was doing research looking at application rates in roads relative to parking lots and on sidewalks. And he believes it's the fear of litigation that's driving people to, according to his results, salt parking lots at rates 13 times higher than we're salting our roads. So there's a lot of salt going down on parking lots and sidewalks because people are afraid of what might happen if there's not enough salt down. But I do hope that the application rates that we have, these conversations, hearing what you've just said, that if we do this brine beforehand, we can even have better results with less salt. So it's not a public safety or like protecting our water. We can do both if we work to really use these best practices. So my last question.
Oh yeah, yep. One other quick interesting thing about when you do use brine, the interesting thing is that the surface, in my experience, actually stays tackier during the event. So instead of getting that ice, actually frozen to the concrete and creating that slip hazard, usually it just stays a little slushier. It just seems like you have so. Sometimes a cheap way in may be to I did this with a couple customers last year, and I'm about to reach out to them soon to see if they will pay for it this year. But it's to just give them a little test run at it a couple of times and show like, hey, this is what we're thinking, and then get out there with them and look at it and walk during the event, and that can help.
Awesome. So the last question I'm going to pose before we'll turn it over and see if anyone in the audience has questions is what advice would you give to another contractor who's wanting to make some changes but doesn't really know where to begin?
I would say start with maybe a smaller unit or like a 250 gallon unit, and try some places, and maybe even talk to some customers if you have some people that are interested. If you don't, maybe offer it out there to some people you think it would work well on, in certain areas, and offer it to them the first year, maybe for no charge, or to kind of get your foot in, to kind of get things going with it. There's obviously going to be a little bit of an investment there up front, but it doesn't have to be significant. A lot of municipalities will work with you also, especially if there are issues with their wells and things like that. I know the city of Madison, Dane County, they'll both sell you brine for cost, which is you can't beat that. That way you're not having to have the initial upfront cost of setting up a brine making unit and things like that, which can be $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 for you. And for a smaller guy, that's not really, smaller company, that's not really feasible. So, but that would be, my suggestion there. Talk to your municipality, talk to some customers and see, get started that way. And I've also found that, for storage wise, you can pick up 250 gallon, totes, tons of different places for 40 or 50 bucks. You fill up 4, 5, 6 of those, and you can have those for for storage for the brine, on your premise. So.
Yeah, so from my end, from a bigger contractor side of things, what we did is we probably started too small, and then it grew a little faster than we expected, so we ended up reinvesting. So I would suggest, if it's something that you think that you're gonna, if you're a larger vendor, you may want to do something that's very repeatable. So we ended up working our second go around as we started buying units with a company called VSI out of Minnesota. Contacting someone like that who they're very knowledgeable. So your vendors are a good place to start. Taking the salt certification through Saltwise obviously is a great place to start to really understand why it's important to be thinking about these things. The association, so SIMA, ASCA, they all have great resources for stuff like this. Feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about salt reduction. And then just implementing sort of slowly, so you don't get don't get overdone. Our first couple of years, there's only a few of us in the organization who kind of knew what was going on, and we bit off maybe more than we could chew, and so it turned into a lot of work. And so maybe at first try it at your own facility, try it at your home, see what you can do there, learn what you're doing, and then make sure you have a plan to scale it up.
Yeah, and to me, this was one of the barriers to get in. Is even it seemed like some of the low level units were a bit of a risk for a smaller company. So shameless plug, we are working with the sewer district to try and make some units that users can rent and not have to incur the expense and try it that way. But I agree with Jeremy. There's nothing wrong with kind of easing into it, getting some familiarity, and then scaling as you are more comfortable in seeing success. If anybody has any questions on that, please reach out to Allison. I unfortunately have a plane that I have to go catch. Otherwise, it might leave without me. But thank you all for your time. And Dan and Jeremy, I look forward to maybe some more conversations. Allison, of course, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you.
All right, so we do have a question that's come in on the chat. It was from Will County Watersheds. How can local watershed groups help with educating clients or promoting companies that are implementing good practices? So I did put into the chat on the Wisconsin Saltwise website, we have a map of all the companies who have gotten Saltwise certified and who want to be promoted as Saltwise companies. And I'm also going to put in there a link to some partner resources. So if watershed groups want to work to just educate the general public, we've got a lot of resources available for that. Jeremy, Dan, I don't know if you guys have specific ideas, like what would you want to see local conservation groups, watershed groups doing to help promote your companies and get the word out?
I definitely do. So from a snow contractor end of things, there's typically no shortage of work necessarily. But there is education that can be done. And I think that's the biggest thing is get with some of your bigger commercial properties and just make sure that they understand training them on some of the same things that we're talking about, understanding the impact, why it's important to care about this, why this is a valuable cause, so that they have, because if there's no reason for them to change what they're doing now is seemingly working for them, they won't change. And that's where it's sort of difficult from a contractor end of things to have that conversation with customers, because it looks like you're trying to sell them this extra service that is new, and you're just, it doesn't work as well unless the customer has bought in fully. So that would be very helpful to educate the public, and especially the larger parking lots around your watershed.
I would agree with Jeremy on that would be helpful if I don't know if there's some kind of like PSA campaign, or if there's something that they could coordinate with the cities or county, or in any particular area, to try and educate people that it's that it's a good thing for the environment. It's better for your parking lots too. Help them last longer, and this and that. I mean, that, like I said, that's always the biggest thing is trying to get people to buy in on it. So
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. I'm trying to be like 3 different people at the same time, but I have put some resources out there for our audience, and you have both, and Matt as well, I know you had to leave us, provided people with a lot of food for thought, a lot of great information. We do have one question here that did come in though. So I know there's a little bit of a delay between kind of what I see and kind of when Zoom, and since we're in Zoom, YouTube, and everybody can talk. So let me jump in here. We got a question from Drew. Are you guys post-treating with liquids as well as pre-treating, or are you just reducing your salt usage on the back end by doing some pre-treatment? So are you doing pre-treatment or both pre and post with liquids?
We've considered doing some just liquid treatments after the fact, but the liquid that we use after for the post treatment is in the pre-wetters on the salt. So we have pre-wetters that will pre-wet with the brine to activate the salt in the lot. So I guess kind of we're not doing just straight liquid application after the fact. It's in conjunction with the salt. So
yeah, so from my end, last year I threw a 350 gallon tank in my plow truck, and I decided that I would plow our retail store that we have here in Middleton, and I did direct liquid application at our retail store all winter last year, just to, because it is a big step up. It's kind of a scary thing, honestly, to like, all right, we're gonna plow and then we're gonna put down liquid, and you hear some kind of horror stories. And I had good results. I always again use the additive to try to kind of make sure that we were taking all the necessary precautions. You definitely do your research. There's higher application rates typically on a before storm situation, an anti-icing situation. You're going to be somewhere between 25 and 45 gallons per acre. I was at times between 100 and 120 gallons per acre on the post, but the results are immediate. I had good results. I don't know that I'm going to sell that to a customer anytime soon, but I'm gonna hopefully we'll keep doing that around our property.
All right, thank you. And we had one of our viewers chimed into the chat and said, thank you, great discussion. So yeah, I can't echo enough how grateful I am to both of you for joining in today and getting this kind of webinar series started up. There's so much great work being done. You are 2 of the people who are on the ground doing this salt reduction work, and I really applaud you for being leaders in this, and hope that we can continue to inspire more people to do what they can to protect our water. So thank you both. And
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it.
take care. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
I applaud you two, Dan.